Hello, I'm Jonathan from Shooting Stuff. Shooting Stuff stocks Lyman products, and they're all available online at shootingstuff.co.za or in our store in Centurion. Today, we're going to set up Lyman Pro Dies in 223 using a load that I've developed for my Remington 700 short action, and we'll test it later. From an earlier video, we set up the 40 dies on Lyman's All-American 8 turret press. I decided to leave them there to show you just how versatile a press it is, because we can now set up a second caliber on the same system. We're going to start off by selecting the correct number 26 shell holder for the 223 to install into the press. The first die is the sizing die. With the Lyman Pro Dies in rifle calibers, you've got two options for expanding the case mouth after resizing. The sizing die has an expander ball as part of the decapping assembly. But because I want to use the Lyman M die as an expander mandrel, and because my cases have already been universally deprimed so that I can anneal them, I'm going to remove the entire decapping assembly for this setup. The setup of the die is no different with or without the decapping assembly. It's a very simple process. So lower the handle, screw the die in until it touches the shell plate, and that's going to be my starting point. My first step is to use a case gauge and the case gauge depth micrometer from Ali Wilson to get a measurement of where the headspace of the case is so that I can correctly set up my die. Coming out of the rifle, I'm getting a reading of 0.109, and I want to size that back about 2 thou for bolt action rifles and 5 thou for semi-autos. This is a bolt action rifle, so we're going to target about a 106, 107. My notes here indicate a 108 with a tolerance on that. So having applied a bit of wax case lube, resizing the case the first time, I can drop it back into the case gauge and I measure a 103. So that's sized way more than I wanted to. We'll set that, I'll set that case aside. First step is just to double check each case as I go. This is a 107. That's quite a nicely sized case already. There's a 109. A little bit of lube. It's important to get lube near the bottom of the case. That's typically the part that sticks in a die with insufficient lubrication. And I'm going to back this one out a little bit. So when I adjust these dies, small amounts, I always look for some sort of reference on the die in order to guide the amount of adjustment. So there's a convenient flat, which is now for me on the front of the die, and that's going to be my next reference point. Proper lubrication makes the sizing easy. You want enough, but not too much. So that's a 107, much less sizing than the previous one. And I'm targeting a 108. So I'm very, very close, and I'll keep that case in the system. I found that when you're setting up the die, it's important to only size each case once, because the characteristics change as the brass work hardens after the sizing process. This one was, again, a 109, so a little bit further out. So my flat is just gone off of center, and I'm going to snug this die down once I've got it resized. So with a case in there to nicely center the die, I snug it down with my wrench, and then it should be perfectly centered for all future cases. Okay, 108. That's a good place to go. So I'm going to size the next bunch of cases once we've got all the other dies set up, and these 3 cases are going to be my examples for the initial setup process. The second die that I'm going to set up is the Lyman M die neck expander. And this die has got an expander mandrel that has an additional expansion for using a bullet feeder right at this area before it hits the end stop. The very thick part is the end stop. There's about 3 millimeters that allows for the bullet expansion to use a bullet feeder, which I'm not using on this press, so I'm going to concentrate on just using about 1 centimeter of this case expansion. This mandrel is adjustable in height, so I'm going to screw the die in until it contacts the shell plate or the shell holder, and then adjust the height of expansion from there. Okay, so there's a contact. I'll take a case that we didn't like for the first part of the process. With the case in the die, it helps to make it ensure everything is nicely centered when I snug it up. And I can feel that I don't have a lot of expansion contact. Screw this down, visually knowing how much of the case there is, and I can feel a much greater range of contact in that die. When you're not using the bullet feeder part, the exact height of the die is not terribly important, except that you want to get a consistent over the entire case neck expansion. So you want to get at least on a 223 that approximately 5 or 6 millimeters of travel over the M die expansion. Part of my setup process is to also ensure that I'm getting an appropriate neck tension on the case. Unfired case, I can measure using the ballistic tools case neck tension gauge, also available from Shooting Stuff, and fired cases have a very low to 0 neck tension. This gauge goes all the way in, and the top ring here is 224 for the 223 caliber. The next ring down is 223, 222, 221. So each ring that you can see would be a 1 thou of neck tension. So all the way in, there's no neck tension on this fired case. This case that I've already resized, I can't put it in. The resizing die squeezed it down too much. And on that one. So the second case goes through the expander M die, and I can get a neck tension of 2 thou visible by the 2 rings. Quite appropriate for most calibers. So the first 2 dies have been set up quite quickly. The next effort is going to be the bullet seating die. Make sure that the micrometer is adjusted long. A sized and flared case in the press with the handle down, and then I screw the seating die in until you feel the die touch the shoulder of the case. The case does not go all the way into the die. There's a small gap at the bottom. Once you can feel the shoulder touch, back it off until you can see the graduations quite clearly. And snug up the lock ring. I can now start seating a bullet. I can feel it didn't seat there, and screwing the die in, I can feel resistance as the bullet starts seating ever so slightly. I'm targeting a length of about 56 millimeters, currently at 64, so there's a long way to go. We'll go in that much and stop at a 0 reference. Seat the bullet again and take a new measurement. 60.2 millimeters. I need to shorten this another nearly 5 millimeters. So another couple of turns. That looks more like a 2:3 proportion. 57.6, going for 56. 1.5 mils, which is 1 mil is 40 thou, 1.5 is going to be 60 thousandths. 1 full turn is 50, and another 10 just to be safe. We back it off 5, and we should be a little bit long on the setting. So in inches, we're looking at 2.2. Let me change that to inches. It just makes it easier to go. 2.213. So another 5, and see that we're going down at the speed we want. 2.209. That's very close, and that's going to be the first sample. The last die in our process is Lyman's taper crimp die for the 223, and it's going to go into the last station. If you're loading for bolt action rifles like I am, you don't need this, but I'm going to set up the process in any event. Loaded case. We're screwing it down until we feel the touch. Now I know that the case is getting supported. Oh, sorry, I wanted to make the micrometer long first. I can feel the effect of the case going into the die. Put the micrometer in a readable position. Snug the lock ring down and use the micrometer to apply the desired amount of crimp. I can feel it tightening up. There was no visible feel or no tangible feel. A few more thou. And there I can start feeling ever so slightly the effect of the crimp on the front of the case. And you'll see a slight polishing on the front of the case. You can measure the differences. I'm not putting a tremendous amount of crimp onto this bolt action cartridge, so I'm not going to adjust this any further, but fine measurements of your case mouth, make sure that any expansion that you've put on for the bullet seater is taken out. And if you're loading for semi-autos, the positive crimp can help prevent bullet setback when feeding from the magazine into the chamber. I've got all the die set up, 40 Smith & Wesson on the one side of this press, 223 on the other, and now I can load 2 calibers without having to go and set up dies again. I'm going to load 5 rounds of my desired load with these dies. We'll evaluate them at the range and include those results at the end of the video. Okay, so I've got 5 fired cases. I know they're fired because the primer's pockets are still a little dirty. And let's take them through the process from the sizing die and neck expansion. After this, it's going for priming, resizing, neck expansion, resizing, and neck expansion. Especially with the small 223 cases, be aware of feeling the cases into the dies, especially this expansion die, because it's very easy if you go in skew and a little bit rough to damage the neck of the case quite severely. Just primed a couple of cases for us to load. My favorite propellant for 223 is Hodgdon's CFE 223. The name kind of indicates how well it's designed for that. And this load of 23.5 is easy to dispense on the Lyman Gen 6 powder dispenser. Remember, my loads are my loads, they're not your loads. Go through sensible load development and don't copy things blindly that you see from anything on the YouTube or social media. Do your proper load development yourself. So I've got 5 shots and a fowler just to start it up, warm up the barrel, and the 6 rounds will give us all the evaluation needed to show how well these dies are working. Crimping on this ammo is entirely optional. It is not a requirement because of it being a bolt action rifle. But I will always recommend crimping ammunition that's destined for a semi-auto. So a turret press like this is kind of semi-progressive, I guess. It allows me to do a couple of things consecutively. These Lyman Pro dies are equally suited for any progressive press that takes standard dies. It was easy to show the simplicity and convenience of these dies on this turret, but whether you're loading on Dillon or Mark 7 or any other progressive system, setting up the advanced Lyman Pro dies is really quick and easy. Biggest advantages functionally come from the micrometer adjustments of your seating and your crimping, that you can set and adjust those and tweak those as your components change or your firearms change without having to adjust the main die bodies. And once you've adjusted, if you've made note of your settings, you can easily dial those back in again and come back to anything that you've done before. If you have enough stations on your system, such as the Mark 7 Apex 10, all of these dies, all 4 of the dies in the process are going to be used to give you full functionality throughout the loading process together with all the safety sensors that you need to ensure high quality, safe to shoot, accurate ammunition in high volumes. So I've got 5 preferred rounds and 1 Fowler loaded up to go and evaluate at the range. The Lyman Pro Dies are available from Shooting Stuff, together with a wide variety of Lyman reloading equipment. It's available online at shootingstuff.co.za or in-store at our shop in Centurion. Shooting Stuff is giving you more time to shoot.